Chapter 10. Let's Go and Buy a Daddy. For a long time after my divorce, I felt adrift. The legal battle had been a grueling ordeal that left me physically and emotionally spent. For the first few days after our victory in court, I wanted nothing more than to sleep. But reality soon beaconed. I was back in my parents' house, but I was no longer just a daughter. I was a mother. My daughter was my greatest love and my absolute responsibility, and I could no longer live with the carefree mindset of my single years. Also, deep down in my heart, I still harbored a secret hope that I might one day reunite with my ex husband, perhaps after his mother passed away, and when we could finally be independent of my parents' wealth. To make that dream a reality, I needed the ability to earn my own living. The problem was that I had no professional skills. I had to start from scratch. As I pondered my future, Jesus appeared to me in a dream with a clear directive: become a hair designer. I woke up feeling skeptical. Since middle school, I'd always been a philosophical, bookish person. I was the last person anyone would ask for beauty advice. I never complained or gave directions about my hairstyling when I went to a salon, since I didn't care. I had no clothes other than my school uniform and underwear during my entire high school years because I never went out. My mother had to spend more than $1,000, a small fortune 40 years ago, after I graduated, just to give me a basic wardrobe. The idea of me as a designer felt absurd. I know people design clothes, I thought, but can hair really be designed? Regardless, I knew the instruction was divine. I studied, practiced, and earned my hairdresser's license. As I suspected, however, no salon was willing to hire a novice stylist with a disability. So I did the unthinkable. I opened my own shop. My teachers were horrified, as opening a business with zero experience was unheard of. Yet, by the grace of God, the shop survived. My secret wish to be reunited with my former husband, however, was gone. He remarried another woman even before I opened my shop. Rumor had it that it was because of his mother. After losing the court case, his mother went almost half mad. Losing the case itself was a shock, but what really hurt her was the fact that she would never be able to see my daughter, her first granddaughter, again. My own mother hadn't helped matters. She would intentionally walk my daughter past their house so the grandmother could watch from a distance, close enough to see, but never close enough to touch. It was a calculated bit of revenge that worked perfectly. My ex husband, unable to watch his mother suffer, remarried almost instantly so that he could have another child. The rumor was that his sister orchestrated all of this once again. Still, I waited for him to come back to me for some time, even after I heard that news. Then I realized one day that I should not hope for this anymore. There was another woman in his life now, and I wouldn't wish the pain I had endured on her. I gave up the dream of reunion without thinking twice and just focused on living with my daughter. It worked for the next 3 years. I moved into my own place and lived with just my daughter. For the first time in my life, I was finally independent of my parents, specifically their money. I was content with my life until the day my daughter came back from playing with her friends and asked me to go to the marketplace. The marketplace, I asked. Is there something special you want to buy? She nodded solemnly. Yes, let's go to the marketplace and buy a daddy. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had seen her watching her friends being picked up by their fathers after work, but I hadn't realized how deeply the absence was felt. She wanted to be like the other children. She needed a father, and I was the only person who could give her one. I needed to marry again, not for myself, but for my girl this time. Finding the right man, however, seemed an impossible task. My daughter was my absolute priority. I needed a man who would love her as his own, which meant he had to have no children of his own. I refused to let her be compared to step siblings or treated as an extra in her own home. I also had no intention of having more children myself, partly due to medical risks and partly to protect her position. Finding a man in 1980s Korea who would marry a disabled woman, accept her child as his only heir, and agree to have no biological children of his own felt like a fool's errand. But nothing is impossible with God. Suddenly, a man appeared in my life. He was a photographer working in a photo shop near my parents' place. The owner of the shop was a friend of my father's. My father went there often and talked about me, apparently, bragging about his first daughter and cursing my ex husband and his family. Out of curiosity, the photographer decided to have a look at me one day. He came to my hair shop, disguising himself as a customer. He said he would like to get a perm. I didn't notice a thing, and to be honest, I wouldn't have been interested even if I had. He was nothing like my first husband, not in appearance or character, and therefore he was not my type at all. He, on the contrary, fell in love with me at first sight. He later confessed that I looked not only beautiful, but great and wonderful, someone he could trust and follow. From then on, he literally came to my shop every day, trying to win my heart. I was often blunt, even rude in my refusals, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. Later, he said even he couldn't understand himself at the time. He felt like he was going crazy, yet he couldn't control his heart, he confessed. I was adamant at first, but there were two events that made me think twice. The first was a lady who was a regular at my salon. She was a fine lady, even in a woman's eyes. Beautiful, well educated, and well off. She lacked nothing and could pick any man she liked. This lady saw this man chasing after me once, and she showed interest in him, asking if I could introduce him to her if I wasn't interested in. That's the moment I realized there must be qualities in him I was overlooking. It was the second one, however, that made me consider him seriously. It was his attitude towards my daughter. Although she was not his own child, he loved her as if she were. He, in fact, loved her more than he loved me from the beginning. He then declared he had no plans for having his own children, and since he didn't have any yet, my daughter would be his only child if we married. He promised he would have a vasectomy to prove it. That shook me to the core. It was the most important condition for my husband to be, and yet it was the condition I had honestly given up hope on, thinking no such man existed. And yet, here he was, promising exactly what I wanted without me even asking. I started to think that maybe it was God who had sent this man to me and my girl. Time went by. After weeks and months, I accepted that this could not go on forever. I had to give him an answer, a final one, for his sake and mine. Hence, I set two conditions. I told him I would think about marrying him if, first, he became a believer and was baptized, and second, if he would go to a prayer mountain and do a 3-day fast. It wasn't a yes. I simply said I would consider it if he did these things. Yet he didn't hesitate at all. He did both without hesitation, and now I had to give him a final answer. Since I couldn't decide for myself, and honestly, he still wasn't my type, I decided to let God decide. Again, I prayed, but with a much harsher condition this time. I prayed, or declared more exactly, that God should have him call me within the next 5 minutes if he was the man God had prepared. If he didn't, I would say no, and that would be final. The phone rang at the 3-minute mark. He was out of breath. I asked, "Why are you panting?" He answered that he had been asleep for a moment at work and had a sudden, overwhelming dream about me. He'd woken up with a desperate need to call, but when the office phone failed, he'd sprinted down the street to a payphone. There was no doubt that it was God's answer to my ridiculous prayer. I had no reason to hesitate anymore, so I told him, "Okay, let's get married." Sorry? He stammered. "I said, let's get married today." Today? Why not? You're a photographer who takes wedding pictures. You have connections with people who lend dresses. I am a hairdresser, which means I can do my own hair and makeup. Our wedding will be in our church, and I know the church hall is available almost any time during the week. So why wait? Obviously, he was speechless, which was understandable considering I had shown him no affection until that moment. In the end, we didn't get married that day, but the next, because my senior pastor pleaded with me to give him just one day to prepare. My daughter was not yet 3 at the time. On our wedding night, I once again had a dream. In my dream, there was a prison, and many people were locked behind the bars. My new husband was one of them. Suddenly, a demon appeared in the prison and spewed water like a river from its mouth. Everyone in the cell was swept away in the current. Everyone except him. It wasn't him, more exactly. It was me. I dove into the current, grabbed my husband by the collar, and swam against the flood. Seeing it was not achieving its purpose of drowning everyone, the demon redoubled its efforts. But I wouldn't let go. I pulled him to safety, and the demon could only glare in impotent rage. As I woke up, I knew there would be many attacks from the enemy in this marriage. Yet I would be able to overcome them as long as I stuck to God. At the same time, I understood that God wanted me to save this man's spirit. That was why God gave him to me, and me to him. I needed a husband and a father for my daughter, and he needed someone who could lead him to Jesus. He later confessed that he had once promised God he would become a sincere believer if God gave him a good wife. It wouldn't be a short-term job. It would be a long and tough fight. However, victory was already declared as long as I stayed close to God. That's how my second marriage began.